Good evening and welcome. My name is Dave Neff. I'm with the Carnegie Historical Museum, and we are here to continue our celebration of family farms that have been in the same family for generations, years. In fact, I think I'm reading here 187 years when we look at this Burns family farm on here. The farm had been owned by Audrey Aurelie Burns, the mom of Cheryl and Steve on that. And so Round Prairie Township started in 1838. I wasn't even around in 1938. I mean, come on, let's get with the program here. So for 187 years, it started with 80 acres, and the farm consisted of 238 acres. The story begins with great-grandparents, or great-great, maybe it is, Thomas and Sarah Lambirth. They purchased the farm and handed down to Jesse and Elizabeth Chezum, and that's where another name has been brought up here this afternoon, this evening. Talitha Blucher?
Blucher.
Blucher.
Or Blucher.
Blucher.
Either way.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification on that.
That's okay.
Anderson and Loyd Blucher, Audrey Aurelie Burns took over the ownership of this heritage. So that means that the state of Iowa, the Iowa Farm Bureau, has a recognition program. 100 years is a century farm, 150 years is a heritage farm. So there's a heritage farm plus on this. This is the 33rd month that we have been hosting this, and I tell you what, it has just been remarkable and amazing, the stories that we have heard. And we're so blessed that Ariel of Fairfield Productions, is that the best one? Fairfield Media Center is here to digitize this, and it will be available for other family and other folks who are interested in learning more about the history of agriculture in Jefferson County on that. If people are aware, we are opening now to those farms that are 50 years and more. These are not recognized by the Iowa Farm Bureau, but we want to open our window to as many family farms as we can. And so we're calling it Golden Anniversary Farms. And so if you are aware of friends, family, other people that have even a 50, 55, 60, please talk with Jake Schmidt as our director here. Okay, at this point, I would like to turn it over to Cheryl, and Steve said he might even have a couple things to share, but we'd like to hear the story from 1838. Do you remember back that far?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, then, we no have proof.
No.
You tell the story.
Only what we've read.
What you've read. Well, Tag, you're it. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Okay. Well, he touched a little. I thought I would first go through the genealogy of the farm. Thomas and Sarah Lambirth married in February of 1836. And she was the daughter of, make sure I get this right, James Tilford, and his wife was Mary. And so they were the parents of Sarah. And so they married the Lambirths just before coming to Iowa, because they left for Iowa in February of 1836. And they arrived in Round Prairie area in May of 1836. And Sarah, she claims to be the first white woman to cross the Skunk River. When there were about 7 single men that traveled with them, as well as Scott Walker and his wife, who was a niece of the Tilfords, Sarah's parents, and they had 2 daughters that traveled. Well, they got to the Skunk River, and they had to dig out the bank so that they could get the wagons down to the river. And the river was very high at that time. So they dug out the bank, and then some of the men went across the river, dug out the other bank, so they could then get the wagon up on the other side. But Sarah was the first woman to go across, so she claims to be the first white woman to cross the Skunk River. And she also told in a newspaper article that once she got across the river, Thomas lifted her up off of the wagon and set her in a bed of nettles that were head high.
Welcome.
So that was part of their honeymoon, I guess, traveling to Iowa and being set into a bed of nettles. So that was quite a beginning. Prior to them bringing the wives, the men had come and found the land they wanted to settle on, and they built cabins, and then they went. That was the way many people did. They came, they found what they wanted, built a cabin, and left. And evidently there was a gentleman named John Huff who came before the Lambirths and Tilfords and Walkers, who had planned to settle where the Lambirths did, but he didn't do any improvements or build anything. He just went back to Illinois to get his family. So when he came back, they had built their cabin. So therefore, he moved it on and settled elsewhere in the area. And so another thing I read in an article, a newspaper article, was when the Lambirths arrived, 2 corners of their log cabin had been burned.
Oh my.
And they, of course, don't know what caused it to be burned, whether it was natural causes from weather or people that just stayed there and moved on, or was it Indians? They don't know. But I found that to be of interest, too, that they had to do repairs on the cabin as soon as they got here. Elizabeth brought apple seeds with her and planted those for apple trees. And I don't know, but the house that's there now had apple trees behind it. And I picked apples when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to think those were from Sarah, which I thought was pretty cool. And one of the first crops Thomas planted was corn, of course. Mm-hmm. So things were not easy, of course, at that time for the families. There's a couple of articles that tell about in the fall, a Baptist minister named Lemon came to the area with his wife and 5 kids. Have you heard of him?
Nope.
Well, coming in the fall, he couldn't plant any crops. And so for food through the winter, they only had what they had brought with them. And of course, there weren't real good roads or trails to go shopping and buy supplies. So during the winter, they were running they were running out of food. And Sarah Lambirth heard about it, and so she took half of what they had stored and took it to the Lemon family. And she saved the other half for Thomas to eat, and then she ate potatoes that winter. And I have an article here. I don't know if I can quickly grab it or not. I love the headline. I can't find it. But it's about it didn't take the government to help someone who needed help. Mm-hmm.
But she survived just on potatoes.
She survived on potatoes that winter. Yeah. Of course, there were Indians in the area when they came, and she, in an article I read, she told about an Indian came by the cabin and Thomas is out in the fields, and she was scared to death. So she went running from the cabin, screaming and hollering for Thomas because she was afraid of the Indian. But after Thomas and Sarah, they had a daughter named Elizabeth who married Jesse Chezum. And Jesse and Elizabeth had 2 daughters, Talitha Bell and Anna. And it's very interesting to me in that Talitha liked to go by the name Belle, so I'll be saying Belle. And Belle was the mother of our grandfather. And Aunt Annie was our great-great aunt, is what she was. And
And when you were growing up, you knew these people and you'd have meals with them and things?
Oh,
or
yes.
Were they, okay.
I grew up knowing she was my great-grandmother, Belle was, and I grew up knowing her. She, at that time, lived in Lockridge, and I can show you the house where she lived. And what I remember about her, she always had a bun on her head. Well, her hair, she took the bun down, was below her waist. And it was all braided, so I was always just amazed at how long her hair was. But yes, I remember going and visiting her. And she passed away probably early to mid-50s.
Okay.
I do remember hers was the first funeral I attended. And then Aunt Annie, her sister Anna, married Axel Anderson. And he was a telegrapher, am I saying that right? For the railroad. He worked for the railroads. And they lived primarily in Streator, Illinois, and over by Galesburg. And then when he retired from the railroad, they moved to the farm. And this is where it gets a little interesting in how the land was acquired and passed down in the family, in that the Tilfords, if you remember, were parents of Sarah Lambirth. So Tilfords, if you're familiar with Round Prairie, their land was north. When you think of Round Prairie Church, their land was diagonally north and east across the road from Round Prairie Church. That was the Tilfords. And I know Mother, as a girl, told about they lived on the family farm there until the house burned down. So when the Tilfords passed away, Belle, our great-grandmother, inherited the Tilfords family farm. And then Aunt Annie inherited the Lambirth farm from the parents. So they both inherited Century Farm, these Century Farm, original lands. And then our grandfather inherited the land that his mother Belle had. And then he purchased the land that Aunt Annie had. So until we sold the Belle's part of the land, I did not know that was the second original farm in Jefferson County. So for many years since, when did Grandpa buy Aunt Annie's? In the 50s, probably?
Yeah, would have been.
So from the 50s on, we owned 2 of the 3 original farms, first farms in Jefferson County. And our farm, the Lambirth farm, I don't think I said, was on the Jefferson Henry County line. And where they originally homesteaded was on the Jefferson County side of that road. But they also owned land in Henry County across the road. And so I went from the Lambirths to the Chezums to Belle and Anna, and then to our grandfather, Loyd Blucher. And he farmed it until 82 is when he passed. And in 82, the farm passed to our mother. And then when our mother passed, it went to us. And that was 5 years ago?
Yeah.
She's been passed about 5 years ago. And we just sold the farm in 22. we had no farmers in the next generation. So that's a little bit about the genealogy of the farm.
Anything else you'd like to share?
No.
Well, Anna married Uncle Axel. And they had no children. But he'd worked for the railroad for quite a while, so he must have made some pretty good money. Because they did travel and see quite a bit. But he got interested in astronomy, so he bought a really nice telescope that at the point he passed, Parsons bought it because it was nicer than anything they had.
Okay.
But they were just a really interesting couple that I got to enjoy them and meet them quite a bit, but not when they were out on the farm. They'd moved to town at that point. And I just always found them fascinating because they were different than anybody I'd ever been around because they were a little bit traveled. So it was pretty cool.
They were very learned people, and they were like another set of grandparents to us. Okay. When they moved to Fairfield, we just did everything you would do with grandparents. We had a very good, close relationship. But they had at least 2 sets of encyclopedias. And so to pass the evenings, they would read the encyclopedias to one another. And I have several books, lots of books. Well, we all do. We shared the books that they had. And he had an encyclopedia for electricians, a whole set of books about electricity and working with electricity. And so it's pretty amazing to us, that they did travel. They went out west to San Francisco, and after the quake, in fact, she had a postcard of the after effects of the San Francisco quake, and they went south. They traced her genealogy back. I did not tell you, the Lambirths and the Walkers and the Tilfords, they came from Adair County, Kentucky, which is central southern Kentucky. And so Aunt Annie and Uncle Axel traced and went back to her roots in Kentucky. And
so they would physically return and go back and
yeah. She wanted to go trace her roots to Kentucky. And she was a member of the Daughters of American Revolution. She traced her lineage back to the Revolution. I have lots of memories, of course, of Aunt Annie and Uncle Axel. Steve was a little toddler and would toddle under their dining room table, which amused her to no end. And it used to be in back of magazines you could send off for free things from different companies. Well, Aunt Annie would do that. And she had a dining room buffet, and in one drawer, when we go up to visit, she'd pull that drawer out and pull those little trinkets that she'd gotten for free from companies, and those were our toys. And it was always exciting to see what Aunt Annie had for us.
Well, and they liked to know about the world and stuff too. Those viewfinders that they used to have. They had boxes and boxes and boxes of different places from around the world. And you put those in and, it went into 3D and it's
yes.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
You were right uptown. So like I say, they were just a really interesting couple that I was always pretty quiet around them, which isn't usual. But I just loved being there. And they always had dates on the table.
Fruit dates?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
why that stuck
Dried
with me
dates.
is like, we never had them at home. But to go over there and have them, boy, that was a treat.
How sweet. How sweet. Now, did you live in town when you were growing up, or did you didn't
Yeah.
spend any time other than over weekends or things staying out on the farm?
Right, right.
Okay.
We lived here in Fairfield,
Okay.
but went to the farm about every other weekend, every other Sunday. We went to the farm
Okay.
and had Sunday dinner and whatever. And
Sunday dinner. What would you have for a menu on
oh,
Sunday
I don't
dinner?
remember.
No. Well, Steve does.
No, because at that time that was going, I was still waddling.
Oh, you were under the table. You didn't care. Okay.
Yeah. I can't tell you. My grandmother was a very good cook. That I do remember, and we would have family dinners, and Grandpa built a rope swing in the tree in the front yard, so that I could swing and have a swing, and they would, something I wouldn't even let my kids do, but they would let me at about age 5. There was woods and a little creek and beyond the barns, and I could go in that woods and wander for as much as I wanted, just as long as I stayed within the fence lines. And I just think of how a young child just out there on their own, playing around the creek and whatever, but that was a good memory. Very good. And at Christmas, we always got our Christmas tree from the woods.
Okay.
And Grandpa and my dad and us kids would go out, and if there was snow, it was like in the picture postcards, Christmas cards, where you're pulling the sleds and going to get your Christmas trees. And we would get one for each of us and help them put theirs up, and then we would put ours up. So that was a really fun memory for me. Steve would have been young. He
Yeah.
would have been pulled on the sled because he was too young to walk along
Yeah,
through the fields
or
to
left
get there.
left inside, so didn't have to mess with me.
Well, that might have been too.
But Grandpa, I'd worked with him out there doing fence work in Clarence Field and stuff, but that was later when I was high school. But he would tell stories about, he had 3 daughters, Athelda, Agatha, and Aurelie. And Aurelie was the tomboy. She liked helping with the horses, and Grandpa had a pair of horses that he used to take to the contest to pole, and just real proud of them. But he was telling a story that Mom would run the horses from the field, hook on the wagon, and then bring it back to put in the corn crib. And she was really good at it. The horses really liked her. And he was talking about one time she came wheeling down to the field, and she had them at full gallop, and she wasn't worried about nothing when they got to where they're supposed to be. She'd go, whoa, and they dug in and slid to a stop. And I was just like, I never saw that side of my mother. Whole new respect for that woman.
Yeah.
You know.
Tell us.
They had a good time growing up out there.
Good.
And being involved in the farm. Just a whole different time.
When your mom was growing up, did Blockridge have a school, or did they homeschool, or what did they do at that time for elementary or whatever?
I think elementary, she went to a one-room school out
Okay.
in that area.
Okay, one of the one-room schools. Okay,
Yeah, I'm almost positive of that.
okay.
And then high school, at some point in high school, they moved to California, and then they came back.
Okay.
And they were in Farson area.
Okay.
But I don't remember exactly how old she was when they did that.
Because I think at one point, we haven't really done a research on this, so if other folks have suggestions, we're ear to ear, but I think each township had a one-room schoolhouse, if I remember seeing a map that Jake dug out one time like that. And so everybody didn't have more than a mile to go to walk or ride a horse or whatever to get to that one-room school.
Yeah, because I met a lady in Burlington who went to my church, and she and Mom were classmates in that area. That's kind of where I'm coming from there.
Good.
mother's two sisters went to a high school in Mount Pleasant. And my grandpa, Agatha could drive, the oldest. And he let her drive to school, but he put a block of wood under the gas pedal so she could only go a certain speed.
What do you call that, a governor?
Cruise control.
Yeah, cruise control. Yeah, good. Well, that way he knew that she wouldn't be tempted to go too much faster on
yeah,
that.
and
So.
of course the girls didn't figure that out for quite a while.
Oh, golly. Now, you mentioned that they raised corn.
Uh-huh.
And did they have any cattle? Did they have any animals, goats, or other critters that were around?
For a while, Grandpa raised sheep,
Okay.
and that was really exciting for me because I got to feed the baby sheep with the milk bottles. And so that was a lot of fun to play with the baby sheep and feed them. And then when they would shear the sheep, that was an amazing process to me, to observe and watch the men shearing the sheep.
Did they have electric, or did they have a hand squeeze to?
Now I can't tell you
Okay,
that.
that's fine. I'm fine. I'm just trying to learn.
I don't know. I don't
Okay.
remember that part.
Okay.
I just remember it was
That they
it was
had a
really,
sheep
and
out
of
there.
course grandmother had cats outside.
Mm-hmm.
She had her cats that she took care of and her flowers. And
Did the women ever do sewing bees, where they would do tea towels or aprons, or come around together and have a big group of ladies sewing at all?
never heard about that.
Okay.
But they did so because I have several doilies and scarves that they did the handiwork, the embroidery and the crocheting and whatever. Pillowcases, very nice pillowcases.
Yeah, you've really laid into Mom's life. She liked to, what they call it, cross stitch.
Uh-huh.
She really enjoyed that, so they must have done that when they were much younger.
Okay. Terrific. Did they have a crank telephone out there?
Oh,
or
yes.
what was,
Yeah.
how did they communicate?
Yes, they had a crank telephone. They had a back porch that they enclosed, and the crank telephone was on the back porch. And I can remember going and cranking it, and yes, that was a big deal. I was telling Steve, of course, they just had an outhouse. And when they, in the 50s, when they had a bathroom in the house, that was a big deal. And what was a really big deal was grandmother got a pink tub, pink sink, and pink toilet.
Whoa, living the life.
That was
Living the
really
life.
up country, I'll tell you, to have that pink bathroom.
You know, you mentioned the outhouse, and we didn't know until this evening that we were in school out at Parsons at the same time, 65 to 69 on that. And we at Parsons were not allowed to have parties on campus. The administration said, no, we're not going to have the alcohol and the other stuff. You go, and so we rented a farmhouse out west toward Batavia, and it had an outhouse. So the story I want to tell you is, here are these young co-eds from New York that come out, and we're out there dancing. Oh, where's the bathroom? Well, follow me. And it was like 25 degrees. No, I said, well, then you just cross your legs. And but all of a sudden they got used to going to the outhouse because they didn't want to miss the rest of the party on that too. So, but yeah, good. I'd like to open it up to those who are in attendance, if they have memories or questions or whatever, that we can have the Burns family discuss and share a little bit more for you on that.
Well, I have a thought, at volunteering here at the Carnegie, one of the projects I got assigned to was to arrange and organize the Parsons files. And I remember, we have a photo of a telescope. I don't know if you've seen it or would want to see it. I could probably find it if the doors open up there.
That'd be pretty interesting, because it probably matches, yeah.
I don't know, I'll when we're through here, I'll go take a look.
I do remember on summer nights, he would put it out in the front yard, and we would look at the moon, and it was just amazing to.
This one
To
is
see that.
indoors from Foster Hall, if I recall, which was the science building.
Right.
So, yeah, I'll see if I'll poke around. and see
Yep.
if
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
They had a, I won't call it a gable, but something on top where they could open it up
Yeah.
and
Something like that.
run the
Yeah.
scope so you had clear, you didn't have to carry it outside every time you wanted to.
Yeah, this was
To do that,
inside,
so.
definitely, so they had to have something
Yeah.
like that,
Right.
yeah.
Good.
Sis was talking about Grandpa had sheep, but the economy must have changed up him some to where he didn't feel like farming was gonna pay the bills or whatever, because then he got into heavy construction with Lou Zatter, and would travel with Lou Zatter and help him out with his projects.
Remember that name.
And so then he became kind of a part-time farmer, and he would help plant and harvest because another younger local guy was kind of having to do the same thing. And so then they would farm it on 50-50. But Grandpa was funny. He liked cars, liked comfortable cars, did not own a pickup. So if he had to go to town and get fencing or whatever, it went right on top. Dad said he got a brand new car, and in 2 days he was hauling fencing strapped to the top of that car, heading back to the farm. And it's just like, Grandpa liked what he liked. Yeah, he's not gonna own a truck to use it a minimal amount of times. He had a vehicle, so I always kind of shook my head at that. It's like, well, worked for him.
It got the job done, got the fence delivered, and keep the sheep in, or whoever they were, keep the grandkids in. Maybe
Yeah.
that was it.
And there's a lot of that stuff we just don't realize the difference in the culture even back then. You had so many more neighbors out through there. What I would like to call real communities. People knew each other and knew kids, and Glasgow had its own baseball team that traveled around other small towns, and it was a big deal. And with the farms expanding and the rural population shrinking, they just changed a lot of the culture of the rural community. But there were some characters, I guarantee.
I remember when Glasgow had a grocery store
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
on the south side of the street there.
Oh,
Had
yes.
a little gas station,
Yeah.
grocery store. Go get a bottle of pop, a candy bar for a dime.
yeah.
Oh, yes.
When our mother passed, we got a card from a gentleman that grew up when our mother did in Glasgow.
Yeah.
And he shared that they used to have movies under a tent by that grocery store,
Yeah.
and they cost $0.25.
Yeah.
And he and she and the other kids would go to the movies
Yeah.
and under that tent. And how much fun they had with that.
Yeah, pretty interesting.
Once around the room, any other family observations, things that were similar that you've been told about your family? And
I'm just wondering how they came with these apple seeds to this cabin that was part burned out, and how long it would take to grow an apple tree, and how did they survive? It's amazing, really.
Yeah.
What people did, and
Right. But they came prepared to plant their crops as soon as they got here. So they would harvest by fall and winter, to carry them through. And they could go like to Fort Madison or somewhere, occasionally to a store, but
was the
Not much.
Burlington Railroad going through Lockridge at that time, or?
I do not know how Uncle Axel came to work for the railroad.
Okay,
And when he retired from the railroad is when he and Aunt Annie moved to the farm. And they built the house that is still there today,
okay.
on the farm at that time.
And it's rumored, I don't have any way to prove it, that it was a Sears home, one of the kid homes.
Yeah.
Because Grandpa had talked about hauling from Lockridge out to the farm, hauling that house out there, and I presume being part of the building. But it's just, it was pretty interesting.
The more you learn, the more questions you've got.
Art.
I took a look at the display upstairs this morning and noticed a pair of like frosted Art Deco kind of lamps.
Yes, yes.
They caught my eye. Is there a story? Could you tell me a little about
I
them?
know nothing about those other than when Mom and Dad were going to sell the farmhouse.
Yeah.
Those were in the attic.
Wow.
And they said to Steve and I, come and anything you see in the attic you want,
Yeah.
you can have it. Otherwise, we're throwing it away.
Yeah.
And they, like you, they caught my eye. And so I took them.
Yeah, I'm not a collector or anything, but I just looked at them. They are cool. I saw the one and I thought, oh, there's another one up there.
Yes.
There's a pair.
Yes, aren't they unique?
Yes.
Very
They are.
unique. I did see a set of those in an antique shop up in Iowa City.
Hmm.
But that's the only time I've seen anything similar
Yeah.
to those. Yeah,
Special.
yeah.
I have a picture here of your grandfather and my grandfather in front of the store that they ran together in Lockridge for a little while, a few years, because the train went through Lockridge and all the farmers would bring their wool there from their sheep.
Oh, sure.
And they put the wool on the train. They were kind of the middleman for wool.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
Yeah, so sheep must have been quite the
Commodity.
commodity, the livestock that
Right.
more people had then.
Well, and that could provide meat for them as well as
Right.
income,
Right.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Back row, anything, observations, thing you want to share? Well, I want to take a moment to say the time that you have put into this and invite everybody on the third floor. We have the presentation that was put together of your artifacts and other things, and to make sure you stop up and see that. But Steve and Cheryl, thank you both for taking the time today to have this month celebration for your family and what they endured, what you've been able to share with us, and now it's permanent.
Yeah.
It's electronically digitized over here, so
Well, thank you for inviting us to do this.
you betcha.
It's been good to go back and reread things that we haven't read in a few years, and it's good to remember
Yes, it is.
our ancestors
Yes, it is.
and what they did and what they went through to get us to where we are. So it's been a really nice project.
Good. Good.
So thank you.
Appreciate you sharing it. Thank you very much.